Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Medill and Buffett Institute as we co-host this really cool event tonight. My name is Stacy Simpson, and I'm with Medill as the Associate Director of Special Events, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce our wonderful Dean, Charles Whitaker, who will be our Master of Ceremonies this evening. Charles?
Thank you, Stacy. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to what we anticipate will be two informational, inspiring, and we hope galvanizing days devoted to addressing the critical moment in the history of our industry, our fragile republic, and in the world. Now, anyone who's been paying attention knows that these are perilous times for journalism and journalists both domestically and abroad. The industry was already hobbled by the collapse of its business model and the poisoning of the media ecosystem with a steady injection of mis and disinformation, which helped sow the seeds of distrust in some of our most valued institutions. And so the environment was ripe for would-be autocrats and other bad actors to step in and suppress the critical information that enables citizens to evaluate whether the actions taken by their elected and appointed officials are in the public's best interest or in the interest of the grifters and powermongers who want to use government to enrich themselves and their cronies. We're currently seeing a very serious assault on media and on truth. And while what we're experiencing is not necessarily unprecedented, this is a dog-eared chapter in the authoritarian playbook. My fear is that what is happening before our eyes is not getting the attention from the public that it deserves. And so when Professor Emeritus Ev Dennis, the former dean of NUQ, offered up funding that he wanted us to use to insert Medill in some meaningful way in the conversation about the moment, I rallied a group of colleagues, including Medill Professor and Director of Strategic Initiatives Louise Kiernan, Associate Professor Doreen Weisenhaus, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications Sarah Brazil, Associate Director of Special Events Stacy Simpson, Director of Alumni Engagement Belinda Clark, and our colleagues in the Roberta Buffett Institute of Global Affairs, Maya Malone and Samantha Nissen, as well as some colleagues in the Pritzker Center for Informational Human Rights, my brain trust, if you will. And we tried to come up with a meaningful way to engage people in our community and beyond on the topic of press freedom. Now, as my staff knows, I do not like throwing a party for the sake of throwing a party. I don't want to hold events where we assemble a group of people to inhale our own oxygen and commiserate about the state of affairs. For me, if we're going to take the time, the effort, and the money to gather people around a critical topic, there should be some action items that come out of the convening. So what we're hoping for is that this symposium for the next couple of days, it will be something of a participatory event. What we're teeing up tonight is a group brainstorming session that we will hold tomorrow with a pair of what I think will be inspiring panels that'll illustrate precisely how serious the moment is and what others are doing to address it. For those of you who join us tomorrow, we're going to ask you to contribute to the conversation about what we should be doing collectively, individually, and institutionally in this moment to raise awareness and sound the alarm about the threat to our free press. We want to know your thoughts on how Medill can use its leverage and its vaulted reputation and massive alumni network to help preserve the press freedom that we're holding on to by a thread, and the many ways our fellow citizens, and the many ways in which our fellow citizens take that for granted. We want not only to identify the challenges of the moment, but how to pursue the solutions. And if you can't make it tomorrow, feel free to reach out to me on email at medill.dean.office.edu and give me your thoughts. Of course, it's not like Medill, as represented by our alumni, is entirely not doing anything about this. As it happens, many of our distinguished alums are out there on the front lines doing the work, sometimes in difficult situations to uphold press freedom. Let's hear from a few of them now.
press freedom is under attack, not just in the United States, but really around the world. And in fact, we see that countries seem to be learning lessons from each other when it comes to crackdowns on press freedom. I believe that one of the most important things that we can do as media organizations is to really try to explain and be thoughtful in doing so to the public why we are essential to democracy. We have to acknowledge that that is not clear to everybody. And so we really have to go above and beyond when it comes to communication.
There are a lot of voices out there that are working to undermine trust in the media, trust in other core institutions of our society. And I think our best response to that is to do the work, is to show up, tell stories, get them right, come back again, repeat, and to help people see humanity in one another, that we are in a field where we can actually have an impact on the future of this country. It's why I got into the field to begin with, but that hasn't changed. And so while maybe we didn't see this moment coming exactly, the threats we're facing are not really new threats.
Just having the presence of the state patrol officers right around us, even having one of their hands on my arm as I was reporting, you could argue that was a form of intimidation. But it clearly took a step to the next level when we were actually put in handcuffs and led away. So in that sense, I was trying to stay true to the story. As a journalist, it's our ability to navigate that pressure, to stay close to the truth and on the truth that really is the lifeblood of this industry. Pressure isn't going away. I think some people are more explicit about it than others, but this is where we operate. My role in this media ecosystem is trying to humanize things a little bit more, and that's where I think the engagement comes from, and that's where I think the trust comes from most critically.
I think there's no question that press freedom, both in the US and around the world, is under attack, and it's been incredibly difficult for journalists to do their jobs. There are governments who are willing to attack the integrity and independence of the press and even go after journalists personally. It's a really dangerous time for reporters, both in the US and around the world, and something that everyone should be watching very closely.
When you work for Voice of America, you understand that you're projecting US soft power. So you're showing the world and parts of the world where press freedom isn't guaranteed in the Constitution like it is here, that you can cover your government without fear or favor. And when the government enacts policies that a lot of people don't agree with, you can cover them critically. I think that's the heart of what's happening with USAGM and Voice of America. If we're not there to shine a light on these things, countries with authoritarian governments will fill the information space. And with Voice of America not having been on the air since the middle of March, we're already seeing that happening.
Journalism is not just a career, it's a calling, a lifestyle really, and a responsibility to hold those in power to account and always to advocate for the facts. As a White House correspondent, I'm not an advocate for Democrats or for Republicans. I'm an advocate for the facts. And now more than ever, when the facts are often under assault, our responsibility is even greater. As a student at Medill, my final project focused on the higher obligation of the news media to get it right. And to this day, I still stand by that responsibility, which really is at the heart of what we as journalists do every day.
Again, I want to thank our colleagues at the Roberta Buffett Institute and the Pulitzer Center for International Human Rights for their thoughtful contributions and help in making this symposium possible. I'm particularly grateful for the fact that they were mindful of reminding us about our colleagues who around the world who are doing this important work. This is a global crisis, and we have to be cognizant of the journalists who have put their lives on the line in an effort to keep us informed about the political machinations and conflicts that rage across the planet. Now, because of the information blackout, we aren't often able to quantify how many journalists have been harmed or killed in conflict zones in a given year. Our friends at two organizations, however, the Committee to Protect Journalists and Reporters Without Borders, put the number this year alone at more than 300. With the bulk of those being reporters who were killed attempting to shed light on the conditions and the conduct of the war in Gaza. In recognition of the heroism and bravery of our international colleagues and of those organizations that attempt to support them, we've taken an unprecedented step this year and will present the James Foley Medal for Courage in Journalism to both the Committee to Protect Journalists and Reporters Without Borders for their efforts to promote and defend press freedom worldwide. A word about the Foley Medal, for those of you who may not know. The Foley Medal is one of Medill's highest honors, named for a truly courageous alumnus who was brutally murdered in 2014 by representatives of the Islamic State in Iraq while working as a freelance correspondent in Syria. This award is our way of honoring not only James Foley's legacy of intrepid journalistic endeavor, it also is an effort to highlight the amazing work that journalists around the world are doing to shine a light on issues that should be of great concern to all of us. It recognizes journalism that exemplifies not just reportorial enterprise, but also a dedication to storytelling that ferrets out truth and highlights injustice, even in the face of the most difficult conditions and circumstances. It's a pleasure for us to present this year's award to these two organizations that are devoted to saving and protecting the reporters, photographers, and videographers who are committed to that mission. Allow me to tell you a little bit about each of these groups. Founded in 1985, Reporters Without Borders is a global nonprofit dedicated to the belief that everyone deserves access to news and information. Headquartered in Paris, its mission aligns with Article 19 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which recognizes the right to gather, receive, and share information. With offices in London, Brussels, Tunis, Washington, D.C., Rio de Janeiro, Dakar, and Taipei, Reporters Without Borders works to protect individual journalists and defend press freedom around the world. Similarly, the Committee to Protect Journalists is an independent nonprofit that promotes the rights of journalists to report news safely without fear of reprisal. With headquarters in New York, CPJ has 40 experts around the world and mobilizes a network of correspondents who report and take action when journalists are at risk and press freedom violations occur. It conducts research, provides data on violations of free speech, and advocates on behalf of journalists and news outlets, all in service of the pursuit of maintaining unfettered access to information worldwide. Please join me in welcoming Clayton Weimers, Executive Director of Reporters Without Borders, and Lucy Westcott, Chief Emergencies Officer of the Committee to Protect Journalists, who are here to accept the 2025 James Foley Medal on behalf of their organizations. Clayton and Lucy.
Thank you, Dean Whitaker and the Medill School for this true honor. I'm accepting this award tonight, but it's really not for me. I'm accepting on behalf of the thousands of journalists around the world whose lives are under threat from a rising tide of despotism, or whose livelihoods are made increasingly precarious by the growing stranglehold of techno-authoritarianism. I'm accepting on behalf of the 553 journalists behind bars today, according to RSF data. And of course, I'm accepting on behalf of my RSF colleagues in 15 offices around the world and our correspondents in 150 others. I often say, only half joking, that I probably have the cushiest job at RSF. I spend my days meeting with congressional staffers, State Department bureaucrats, or giving interviews to the media. And I get to speak in salubrious rooms like this with like-minded allies and take credit for the great work that our organization does. But my most common work hazard is the 2.5-hour delay to my flight this morning. Many of my colleagues, too many for me to name here, face down far more serious challenges on a daily basis. I dedicate this award to them. To my colleague, Alexandra Bielikowska, who was detained and expelled from Hong Kong for doing her job. To my colleagues in our Rio office who were hacked and spied on by the Bolsonaro regime's intelligence services. To Erol Alndaroglu in Turkey, who for the past 7 years has been on trial for terrorism-related charges when his only crime was doing journalism. And to Khaled Dareni in Algeria, who before he was an RSF representative was the subject of an RSF advocacy campaign while he spent 11 months in prison, again, for doing his job as a journalist. So tonight, I might be serving as the face of RSF in accepting this medal, but I gratefully do so on behalf of my colleagues who are the heart of RSF day in, day out. I thank you tonight for honoring us.
Thank you to Dean Whitaker and to the team at the Medill School of Journalism for this honour. Thank you as well to RSF, or Reporters Without Borders, with whom we share this award for being a steadfast partner of CPJ. We are proud to stand alongside you in this work, keeping journalists safe and in the fight for press freedom. And as Dean Whitaker said just now, there has never been a more crucial time to do so. In our 44 years of existence, in our organisation's history, there has never been a more dangerous time to be a journalist. Journalists covering conflicts and wars spanning the globe have been killed in unprecedented numbers over the past several years, from Ukraine to Gaza and from Sudan to Haiti. The CPJ is incredibly grateful to be honoured with this award at a time when press freedom globally is under fire and in historic and extreme peril. And this medal recognises and honours the hundreds of journalists who have been killed while reporting on conflict. For so many of them, the conflict in question is not far away, but a daily and inescapable reality. These journalists are reporting on their own communities, on their own country. They are our eyes and ears, risking their lives to bring not only crucial information to their own communities, but truth to the wider world. And I would like to tell you about one of those journalists who was killed in conflict this year, Mariam Abu Daqqa. Mariam is one of nearly 200 Palestinian journalists in Gaza who have been killed by Israel in a war that has for now been paused. Mariam was a freelance Palestinian photojournalist in Gaza, part of a decimated press corps and one of the last remaining eyes and ears to the reality on the ground. For the past 2 years, CPJ has funded workspaces for journalists in Gaza, where they can be together, where they can access more stable internet and electricity, and in many cases much needed food and water. After Mariam was killed alongside colleagues in an airstrike on Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, we learned from our local partner with whom we work on these workspaces a little bit more about Mariam, and she was called, quote, the guardian of the station. And our partner went on to tell us that though unpaid for her work, she performed it with immense love and devotion. Mariam was the journalist's timer, ensuring everyone was inside by the 7 p.m. curfew. Each morning she would open the doors, check all the supplies, and report on our needs. She was neither the oldest nor the youngest among the women journalists, yet she naturally assumed the role of a mother, tough when necessary, yet always passionate and tender. And as the adage goes, history is told by those who report it, but far too often, those who report it are killed for doing so. This medal rightly honours them. And amid the most dangerous time to be a journalist, the state of the world, it also shows that it has never been a more important time to be one. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton and Lucy. As we were looking for a speaker to launch this symposium and set the tone for our discussions tomorrow, we sought a media leader who embodied the values that we're espousing. We found that leader in Wendy McMahon, the former president and CEO of CBS News and CBS Media Ventures. Wendy is a trailblazing media leader who has introduced innovation and digital strategy at a critical moment in the industry. During her time at the helm of CBS News, she expanded the reach of local journalism and built nationally recognized content brands. She orchestrated an ambitious integration of outlets and services, uniting national and local newsrooms in a 24/7 multi-platform news nexus, including streaming channels that reach billions of viewers. She was a pioneer in the use of AI, having constructed the CBS News Confirmed Unit, a team of forensic journalists who used AI to combat misinformation while also fostering innovation labs that helped mobilize and modernize storytelling. She's received numerous accolades in her career in television, including leading teams that have received the Emmy, AP, Edward R. Murrow Awards for Journalistic Excellence, and she was named one of the Variety 500 and one of the 2024 Giants of Broadcasting. We're very happy to have her share her reflections on the moment with us, so please join me in welcoming Wendy McMahon.
Oh, look, it works like it's supposed to. It comes up. It's amazing. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. Thank you, Dean Whitaker. I think 30 days after I resigned from CBS News and Stations and CBS Media Ventures, Dean called me and said, hey, what are you doing in October? And I knew I had to say yes, and I am so glad to be here. So I have to tell you that originally I had a very different open prepared for tonight. It was a polished historical bit on, let's see, the Bill of Rights, First Amendment, freedom of the press. But in true journalistic fashion, events here in Chicago, in Illinois, led me to scrap that intro and lead with what's happening now. Over the last weeks, 4 journalists with the website Block Club Chicago were hit with pepper balls, tear gassed while covering protests at the Broadview ICE facility. A news editor for the Chicago Reader shot with a rubber bullet and tear gassed. A reporter for CBS News Chicago said her vehicle was hit with a pepper ball while driving, the chemicals entering her car and making her feel like her face was burning. All of these complaints were cited in a lawsuit led by the Chicago Headline Club. The Illinois Press Association, they originally joined the lawsuit to defend the journalists' rights. Then the board reversed course, and its longtime CEO, Don Craven, resigned. Craven said he needed to, quote, preserve and protect the First Amendment rights of journalists. So yes, I scrapped my original reporting because historical references about journalism can seem slightly out of touch when there's a case study happening right outside our doors, where truth is fighting for its life and fighting to stay above the fold. That's why tonight is so important. And I want to say thank you again just to the Medill School of Journalism, to Northwestern University for this event. I feel in this room we are united. This is a group united in our belief in the power of journalism, the necessity, the importance of journalism, and not just as a profession, but as a public service and a public trust. I pulled this off of the Medill website, Dean Whitaker, so I hope it's updated, because I believe in mission. I believe mission grounds you, it centers you. The Medill School of Journalism's mission centers on the enduring values of journalism, with integrity being a foundational principle. It prepares students to become ethical and innovative leaders in a rapidly changing media landscape. Integrity as a foundational principle, yes. Look, all of you have heard the quote, right? Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. My version of that quote reads a bit different. Integrity is doing the right thing even when everyone is watching. Because when you're in the spotlight and the pressure and the tensions are heightened, when your decisions, your choices could have a dramatic impact, dramatic consequences on you, on your family, on the people that work with you and for you, well, that's when integrity either holds firm or falls apart. And this moment demands integrity from all of us. And yes, everyone is watching. To bear witness, to hold the powerful to account, to serve the public interest, yes, that is the job of a reporter. But as you heard tonight, that job is absolutely a calling. And that calling has never been more tested. Journalism, an essential guardrail of democracy, it is under siege, and this is not hyperbole. There are sweeping, deliberate attempts to dismantle the very purpose of journalism and the protections that sustain it. Public funding gutted, frivolous lawsuits filed, investigations launched to intimidate, bans and gag orders imposed to silence, source shields and access stripped away, and all of it is layered on top of the suffocating force of corporate consolidation, quarter after quarter of layoffs in newsrooms, and of course, an astonishing lack of trust in mainstream media. The fact is that day after day, axes are being swung at the First Amendment, testing its strength, seeing if it will splinter. And the concern, the consequence, of course, right, is that the very right that guarantees all others, it will be whittled away, not in one clean strike. That's not how it happens, but in 1,000 deliberate cuts. I can tell you that even amid these challenges, the instinct to report, to reveal, it endures. It endures. Across this country, journalists continue to answer the call. They're still showing up. They're doing their very best work, as we saw tonight in the recognition of the Committee to Protect Journalists and Reporters Without Borders. Thank you, an incredibly worthy recognition. I can tell you that the mission and the resolve of those organizations is especially important for our correspondents in conflict zones, where journalists are often paying the highest of prices to report truth. The deadliest conflict for media workers in history is the war in Gaza. Estimates place the number killed at nearly 250 since October 7th of 2023. And I can tell you, these were not numbers. They were stories, they were voices, they were witnesses, they were people with friends and families. People who will be missed, not for their headlines or their datelines, but for who they were. Whenever I visited the CBS News London Bureau, I often said I would go visit the London Bureau when I needed to be reminded of the purpose and the mission. I would come back with such pride. Yes, of course, in the work, but even more so the spirit, the sense of purpose, the understanding among this group. CBS News dispatches its correspondents into conflict zones from the London Bureau. They understood without their courage, without their commitment, the truth would go untold. And their acceptance of the risks, the dangers in doing so, because it was their calling, it always struck me. And it always should. I will never forget the day I got a call, and every news executive gets these calls. You get them each and every day. A correspondent and a crew had been taken hostage in the Middle East, and I remember the shock, the disbelief, the frantic coordination across continents, because in that moment, the fear isn't abstract, it's tangible. A reminder that behind every story you read, behind every live shot you see on television, is a human being putting their life on the line to tell us the truth. And to be clear, there is truth. There are non-negotiable absolutes. There are inarguable facts. There is truth. And the search for it, the allegiance to it, is the foundation of every newsroom that I've had the honor to lead. I've worked in news at two of the largest media organizations in the country, and I can tell you, real journalists are committed to uncovering, to questioning, to challenging, without fear and without favor. I can assure you that they are not meeting in back rooms, shifting stories and narratives, producing or editing pieces to stoke fear or to curry favor. The best journalists I've worked with, they are relentless in their pursuit of the truth, no matter the journey or the outcome. One such journalist is Lesley Stahl, best known for her decades-long tenure at CBS News and 60 Minutes. She was the first female White House correspondent at CBS News. I don't think it will surprise anyone in this room when I tell you she suffers no fools. And when I first was named CEO of CBS News, we had lunch. And during that lunch, I could only think of two things: that Leslie Stahl, the Leslie Stahl, was A, eating with me, and that B, she kind of seemed into it. She liked me. And this is actually a press clipping from a ceremony where Leslie Stahl was honored with the First Amendment Award, and I was fortunate to be in attendance. After the ceremony, she sent me an email that is framed and sits on my desk at home. And she said in the email that there aren't many times in life when we get the chance and the privilege to test our mettle without getting ooey gooey. Yes, I promise Leslie Stahl did type ooey gooey in an email. That happened. Without getting ooey gooey, you must feel proud of putting so much on the line, of planting the flag for a worthy principle. Mettle. What a great word, right? It doesn't get nearly the billing that resilience does. Resilience is about how well you recover, right? How you adapt, how you bounce back from a hardship, a mistake perhaps. But mettle is about how bravely, how courageously you respond in the exact moment when you're tested. It's about your resolve, your courage under fire. I like to think of it as if resilience helps you recover after the storm, rebuild after the fact. Mettle is what lets you stand in the storm with strength and with conviction. I grew up in New Orleans, so epic thunderstorms and hurricanes, those were just regular occurrences. And standing in those winds, those gusts, steeling yourself so as to not lose your footing, that's strength, physical and mental strength. That's mettle. I believe that nowhere is our resolve or our mettle more needed than in local news. I've worked in net news, of course, but I spent most of my career in local television and local news, proudly so. Local news is the heartbeat of our communities. It's where trust is built and stories begin. It's where people learn how decisions are made, who represents them, what's happening down the street. It is the foundation, it is the base for our democracy. I believe that. It is essential and it is personal. And it's always been personal for me. In the first 20 years of my career, I worked at 6 different local television stations and lived in 6 different cities. First in Savannah, Georgia, Market 100 at WTOC. Then there was Jacksonville, Florida at WJXT, at the time Post Newsweek, now Graham. From there, I headed to Austin, Texas at KXAN, followed by WCCO in Minneapolis, and then WBZ in Boston, and finally KABC in Los Angeles, where while I was there, the 2014 wildfires destroyed more than 625,000 acres, underscoring the growing threat of fires amid persistent droughts, as well as changing climate conditions. The fact is that when wildfires tear across hillsides, as they do in Los Angeles, or storms flood streets, local news organizations, they become lifelines. They're tracking evacuation routes in real time. They're connecting loved ones. They're amplifying the voices of those in need. I've seen it again and again. And in those moments, when communities need urgent help and information, local reporters are at their best. Before, during, and after, long after the net news crews have gone, they are the ones helping knit our communities back together. So yes, local news is the heartbeat of our communities, but we also have to face the truth that that heartbeat is weakening. A report from the Northwestern Local News Initiative found that the U.S. has lost 75% of its local journalists since 2002. 2/3 of U.S. counties have fewer than 10 journalists per 100,000 people, and more than 200 counties have no local news at all. How can we expect to have an informed electorate when entire counties are news deserts, places without a local newsroom, without a local reporter to check power or shine light on local decisions? The loss of local journalists, it isn't just a crisis for our industry, it is a crisis for our democracy. Because when local journalism disappears, government transparency, it declines. And when watchdogs are weakened, secrecy thrives. A recently conducted research project from the Breckner Center for Freedom of Information requested the same 7 records from 44 state governments under each state's public records law. Now, for those of you who don't know, public records request is one of, if not the most important tool in a journalist's toolkit. The states with fewer newspapers per capita were more likely to ignore or deny their requests. And then at the local level, Medill researchers requested records from 165 news desert counties. Almost half didn't respond. And among the counties that did, 70% had not received a single records request from a journalist in a full year. Not one request. So what happens when there is no one holding account? What happens when no one is left to ask hard questions? I would argue you see the results of that now in our country. Polarization deepens. Voter turnout declines. And civic engagement, the very thing that holds us together, that makes a community, it erodes. Strong local journalism, it equals a strong democracy. That's why we must fight for every voice, every story, and every newsroom. I believe in local newsrooms. I believe they have the power to instill trust, to rebuild the civic fabric, to help neighbors understand each other, and to make sure we don't lose our grip on what's true, what's human, and what's worth protecting. Local news needs to be protected. It needs to be sustained. So how do we do that? I don't have all the answers, but I do have a few ideas. First, local news must reground itself in its mission to be absolutely local. When I was at ABC and then at CBS, I championed the launch of community journalists. These were journalists with a beat, building their own brand alongside that of their newsroom, but outside of their newsroom. They were embedded in local communities. They were building sources, making relationships, making connections, and encouraging community members to become involved in covering their own neighborhoods. Local news also has to innovate, experimenting with new business models, diversifying its revenue streams, combining institutional support with the individual creator intimacy and scrappiness, meeting younger audiences where they are with local content that engages across platforms. But this requires experimentation. It requires support. And yes, it requires money. And look, there are many who are stepping up. I have a few of them on this slide. The American Journalism Project is helping to build nonprofit local newsrooms, supporting the likes of Block Club Chicago and City Bureau. Press Forward has announced a $500 million commitment to strengthen local journalism. The Public Media Company is offering grants to stations that have lost their government funding. Report for America continues to place journalists in underserved communities. And Stephen Waldman, please follow him on LinkedIn. He is such a champion. He is the CEO of Rebuild Local News, and he's championing policies like Illinois' new $4 million small business local news tax credit. And it's benefiting 120 outlets in the state. I have an enduring belief I have an enduring belief that local news isn't just about holding power to account, right? It's about giving people something real to hold on to. By subscribing, by donating, by engaging, by watching and reading, by supporting public policies that fund the effort, we keep local newsrooms alive, and we ensure our communities have something to hold on to. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Our business, the business of journalism, it is in flux. Streaming, social media, subscription fatigue, search engine shifts, a changing ad landscape, and AI that can generate headlines, but definitely not context. We are entering an era where the line between reality and replication is blurring faster than I fear our laws or our ethics or even our instincts can keep up. And this is a multi-layered challenge. AI doesn't have bias in the human sense, right? But it inherits the bias and the agenda of its creators. So whatever links it's leveraging, whatever content it culls, the finished AI-generated product is only as good, only as true as the information is aggregating, right? As the information it's scraping. It doesn't know its blind spots. So it would be good. It would be comforting, in fact, I think, for everyone in this room if AI systems were built on the backs of real journalism. But to scrape that content without compensation, well, it weakens the very newsrooms that we want AI to depend on, that AI should want to depend on for credible content. So here's my thinking. If you're going to aggregate, leverage, scrape local, national, global news sites, then pay for it. So earlier this year, after a natural disaster overseas, a photo of a baby pulled from rubble spread across social. This is the photo, actually. And millions of shares in a matter of hours. It was moving, it was emotional, and it was entirely fabricated. It was AI generated. And this is the example I pulled, but there are so many. I could have chosen any number of photos. AI is not going away. It's in our newsrooms, it's in your feeds. So the question is, how do we protect ourselves and the public from attempts to misinform? And in the case of this baby photo, hijack our empathy. At CBS News, and the dean spoke about this, we established a first-of-its-kind team called CBS News Confirmed. They were part of the standards team, but they were not your typical newsroom employees. They were forensic journalists, they were data scientists, they were coders, and they were investigators, skilled in audio and video verification. And they used AI tools and technology to do so, to perform that work. And they were entrusted with ensuring that CBS News would never publish something false, would never air a deepfake. They were an early warning and detection system, and they made CBS News better. So what to do about AI? Because in news organizations, AI can accelerate workflows, it can make use of your archives, and as I just said, it can even help verify the accuracy or not of AI-generated video and audio coming in to the newsrooms. But it can also manufacture content like this, creating untruths at a ridiculous speed, and this one isn't even that sophisticated. So my guidance, my advice for news organizations right now, human judgment isn't optional. Don't reject AI, don't run from it, but humanize it. Surround it with people who can apply skepticism and who understand the consequence of getting it wrong. Ensure it serves the journalism and not the other way around. We've talked quite a bit about change today, whether the changes are happening to us or they are changes we choose. In all cases, with every evolution, every transformation, there is tension, because change absolutely tests trust. I've spent my career leading a legacy or traditional industry through real-time transformation, uniting local and national newsrooms, launching streaming channels, standing up teams of data journalists and augmented reality artists to stay current, to serve the next generation viewer. And I can tell you that during one of those transformations, I had a photographer walk up to me at our Minnesota station, and he said, "Wendy, if we do what you envision, I'm worried that I won't recognize this newsroom anymore." It wasn't resistance, right? It was fear talking, fear that the values of journalism might be lost in the race to modernize. But over time, that photographer became one of our strongest champions, training others, mentoring younger journalists, helping us prove that innovation and integrity, they can coexist. And really, that's the arc that news organizations, journalism schools, journalists and leaders must walk, from fear to ownership. Because the very forces disrupting journalism and the business of journalism today, technology, consolidation, polarization, they are the same forces threatening democracy itself. So the question isn't just how we lead change in our newsrooms and our schools and our industry to counter those threats, but how we lead through it, how we carry forward our core purposes, truth, accountability, service, into every platform and into the future. Protect the purpose, protect the ethics, while embracing and owning the change. I don't think the need for journalism is in decline. I absolutely do not. If anything, trustworthy content has never been more valuable. People want to know what's real. It's that the definition of a newsroom is changing. The scaffolding is shifting. Today, a third of US-based journalists, they describe themselves as freelance or self-employed. Many have left traditional institutions due to layoffs, others not because they stopped believing in the work, but because they still do. They want to report without interference. They want to build direct trust with their readers and their viewers, and they want to reconnect journalism with community. These independent journalists are in many ways the new town square. They're covering school board meetings on Substack. They're investigating corruption powered by newsletters from Beehive, which is a group that I'm advising. And they're amplifying voices and stories on YouTube and TikTok. When asked in this year's Medill Local News Initiative study about how they consume local news, 30% of respondents chose content creators. That includes social media creators as well as writers who, again, live on Substack and Beehive. That 30%, it comes in well ahead of newspapers at 18%. As the Local News Initiative said in an article to go along with the research, quote, individuals can compete with major news organizations to develop followings and build trust. And many of them are doing it without benefits, without safety nets, without lawyers, editors, or infrastructure, and they can be vulnerable financially, legally. So the next great challenge is for our industry. It's not just about saving newsrooms. It's about building new ones and being open-minded to the fact that they may look very different than what we are used to. I've actually chosen to advise Beehive, a platform built to give independent journalists that scaffolding and sustainability, because I so believe that the business model of the future, the operating system for the future of journalism, is going to be built platform by platform, independent journalists by independent journalists, in partnership with these news institutions. It's not about replacing legacy media. Legacy media does the incredibly important work of reporting. And we've talked about it quite a bit tonight, boots on the ground reporting. But it is about bringing in some reinforcements, creating new pathways for credible journalism to thrive. Great journalism can be a stable, a solid business. I believe it, I'm convinced of it. And if we want a democracy that endures, we must work to make it one. I think it's clear that it's time to write the next chapter for our profession, with our actions and not just our words. One journalist whose words and actions always align is Scott Pelley, of course with 60 Minutes. His book, Truth Worth Telling, was published in 2019, and it closes with a beautiful chapter called To a Young Journalist. Pelley wrote then, "We need a new generation of great journalists, particularly now. There is no democracy without journalism. Freedom of speech and freedom of the press were the rights that guaranteed all of our other rights." He urges young journalists, do your job, do it well, and stay in the fight. Scott understood, and Scott understands, that without fresh voices, we risk losing our compass, we risk losing our democracy. And it's universities and programs like the Medill School of Journalism that ensures the next wave of journalists are equipped with the essential skills and values needed for this moment right now. That was true in 2019, and it's true now. But at breakfast with Scott this summer, I asked how he would close his book 6 years later. If uplifting the next generation of reporters was his last word in 2019, what would be his final chapter in 2025? And he said he would urge news consumers to be more disciplined, to be more discerning in their news diets. Leave the comfort of echo chambers and algorithms, and reward credible, fact-based reporting. What Scott was really speaking to is the need for all of us to embrace our roles, to answer the call, and to become part of the solution. The future of journalism, it requires your partnership. Invest in journalism, not because it's easy, but because it matters. Subscribe and donate. Support policy that protects press freedom and fights news deserts. Fund and uplift public, local, and nonprofit media, the trusted voices in cities and towns across America. For your own media diet, resist those echo chambers fueled by AI algorithms. I feel like algorithms have become a sort of de facto editor-in-chief of information. How concerning is that? Deciding which stories rise, which voices are amplified, and which ones are buried. They don't reward accuracy. They reward outrage. So, regain control. Take back your news and information diet and reward credible reporting, reward real journalists and dogged reporters. And then finally, defend the truth. Above all, defend the truth. Out loud, on the record, in every forum where it's under threat. You don't know when it will be your moment to stand up, to demonstrate courage under fire, and to, yes, stand in the storm and show some mettle. So the name of the Medill School event this week, Press Freedom Under Fire, Threats to Journalism and Democracy, it could not be more appropriate. But freedom of the press has always been under fire, from kings and censors, from demagogues and disinformation, and yes, from the apathy of those who thought someone else would defend it would protect it. We cannot be apathetic. Journalism is not a luxury. It's a democratic necessity. And like democracy, it demands participation, it demands courage, it demands reinvention. So let's bring this full circle to how I was originally planning on starting my keynote. The freedom of the press was a freedom so essential, our founding fathers knew that without it, liberty wouldn't last. James Madison called it the circulatory system of democracy. Gosh, is that beautiful? The circulatory system of democracy. Madison also placed freedom of the press firmly as the Third Amendment. That is not a misspeak. When Madison first drafted the Bill of Rights in 1789, the press wasn't first. It was third. The first two dealt with congressional pay and representation. But when those first two amendments didn't make the cut, the press got called up to the top spot. First in the Bill of Rights batting order. I have a 13-year-old who plays baseball. And it was almost entirely by accident. So no, Madison did not put freedom of the press at the top of the Bill of Rights. But history had other plans. And even in the 18th century, the truth found a way to be first, to become the lead story. And today the story is still being written by all of us. The baton has been passed. The byline is yours now. Where will you plant your flag? Whether in Market 100 in Savannah, Georgia, or leading one of America's largest and most influential news organizations, I have always believed in the why of the work, the mission, and the purpose. And it's a privilege to be a part of it. But with privilege comes great responsibility. Yes, reporters are called to journalism. They're called to serve as watchdogs, investigators, sense makers, and connectors in communities, in the nation's capital, in conflict zones around the world. But now we are called forward too, to ensure freedom of the press remains the headline for the American experiment. It's not just the First Amendment to our Constitution. It is the first condition of our democracy. May we each have the courage and, yes, the mettle to keep it that way. Thank you. So on this QR code, I included some of the organizations I mentioned today. So it's organizations and causes I think worthy of your contributions and your participation. So please do snap and support. There's also a way to get in touch with me via the QR code. So thank you again for your engagement.
Hi, everybody. My name is Louise Kiernan. I'm a professor at Medill, the school's director of strategic initiatives, and one of the many people who work to put together this two-day symposium. First, please join me in thanking Wendy again for a keynote speech that so clearly and eloquently established the stakes, and I will say set a very high bar for what we want to address in the rest of our time together, the escalating threats to press freedom and democracy, both here and abroad. We're going to continue the conversation tomorrow with a mix of newsroom leaders, experts, and on-the-ground journalists, both domestic and international, who are going to be discussing the specific challenges that journalism faces and how to address them. I'm hoping that you will consider joining us. The morning session is full. That is on physical and digital intimidation of journalists. But even if you are not registered, we do have some spots in the afternoon session, which will be looking at the legal and financial weaponry that is being used against journalists and that journalists can use to address the threats that they face. I hadn't planned to say this, so I'm going to apologize, Roberson, because I would have given you a heads up and hopefully not embarrass you. But I realized sitting here tonight that the reason I am in this room is also in the room, and that is Roberson Alphonse and his wife, Natalie Kardashian. I first met Roberson almost 3 years ago at an event in Washington, D.C., not unlike this one, a press freedom event. And he had recently fled Haiti after surviving an assassination attempt when his car was ambushed by gunmen. Roberson, who is the national news editor for Haiti's largest newspaper, really shifted for me what I thought about press freedom. And when I came back, Charles and I were continuing conversations we had about the ways we wanted Medill to be part of the effort to protect journalism and to protect democracy. And among the many things that we've tried, we've been very fortunate, along with our partners at the Buffett Center for International Affairs, to bring Roberson here as a journalist in residence. He continues to report on Haiti from here. And I mention him because as we adjourn for the reception, which I've been asked to tell you runs until 8:30, I want you all to keep in mind as we continue to struggle with these questions and hopefully find some answers, that at the very heart of press freedom, of what we're here to talk about, are individuals like Roberson, who have, to borrow Wendy's word, which I love, who have the mettle to do this work day in and day out, no matter what it costs. So thank you, and thank you.